Hello and welcome. Oh, crikey, sorry, that was very loud. Hello and welcome back. Sorry for your eardrums being punctured there. Hope you had a very good coffee break, saw the displays, and got to meet old friends, colleagues, and competitors again. We're on to the second session of this morning, and I'd like to introduce Paul Sheerin, who is Chair of the Shipbuilding Skills Delivery Task Force and Executive Officer of Scottish Engineering. Paul has been Chief Executive of Scottish Engineering since 2018 and Scotland's member organisation for engineering and manufacturing companies, which represents over 500 members and amazingly over 1/3 of the employment of this sector in Scotland. He's previously was Managing Director of the UK entity for Babcock and Wilcox, headquartered in the US, designing, developing and manufacturing automated boiler cleaning equipment for energy, paper and maritime applications. Paul is also a trustee, as if that wasn't enough, at the Strathleithen Foundation, volunteering for promoting enterprise and skills and access for young people. So I'd very much like to introduce, and if we could all welcome Paul to the stage. Thank you very much.
Morning, everyone. Perhaps some of you in our audience who are as old as me might remember the focus on the power of positive language, which led to us coaching ourselves to no longer talk about problem statements and instead reframe them as opportunity statements. For me, that's advice I slavishly followed as long as I was in an organisation which told me that was the case. But I'm no longer in that situation. I'm probably in a role now where I have more autonomy than is sensible. And as a result, I've returned to using words that match the actual situation. So when we talk about skills, we should be really honest, for we have a big problem on our hands. And it's important to call it that so that we all sit up in our seats and take note. So I'm sure you'd be sitting there. If I was sitting in your seats, I'd be thinking, well, talk about stating the obvious. After all, it's the first and last conversation in any discussion I have within engineering and manufacturing, and I doubt it would be any different for you. And you could, I'm sure, cite the concerns as well as me. We have an ageing population driving a disproportionate ratio of retirement losses. We achieved a chronic underinvestment in work-based learning in the 90s, the noughties, and the 2010s. And yes, this is predominantly an issue in roles delivered by the output of engineering apprenticeships. But I wonder if you, like me, have looked recently at the birth rate stats that are the main pipeline of potential new recruits to industry across the UK. So unfortunately, I couldn't find an overall UK summary to quote for you today, but I went back to the one that originally made me fall off my seat, which were the figures for Scotland released at the end of 2023. These show that our birth rate has fallen to 1/5 of the level it was in 1855 when records began. But perhaps more importantly, in my short 56 years on this earth, it's fallen by a half. But the really scary bit, however, is the last few years of the graph, where the gradient of fall takes a steeper trajectory. And it's shocking to see, but not a surprise perhaps, if, like me, you've experienced conversations with younger people who have stated that they're not sure if children are in their future because of their concerns for climate emergency. And I don't see any reason why that would be materially different anywhere else in the UK. So we start from that position. What else do we throw in the mix of concerns? Well, I'm sure you all know as well. In England and Wales, apprenticeships are still stubbornly 40% down on where they were pre-apprenticeship levy days. In Scotland, we think we're funding probably about 75% of the demand for apprenticeships from Scottish Government. So we have some huge gaps to fill and close there. And then I was thinking about this on the way here. Did anyone else from me notice the massive change that's going on in Birmingham for the fantastic engineering project, which is HS2? So huge disruption if you're living in the city, I'm sure, but for a better infrastructure, something that the UK, could really do with upping its game on across the board. So when you consider that, though, think about rail infrastructure all across the UK, which has to change to meet our decarbonisation targets. Everything that currently runs off diesel and diesel hybrid has to change, has to move to electrification. Think of the infrastructure and all of the skills and roles that are in that, and then think about the overlap between them and shipbuilding. I mentioned HS2, rail. What about electrical transmission? So again, apologies, I'm still learning and widening my view to a more UK basis. But I know Scotland well, and in Scotland, in the next 10 years, we face £32 billion worth of investment in our grid infrastructure to ready ourselves for offshore wind. That's an awful lot of fabrication, a lot of construction, a lot of platers, welders, and all roles that we talk a lot in our industry about needing. The situation on skills is not unique to shipbuilding. Why would it be? And I suppose no sector can claim a monopoly on this particular headache. So why are we talking about it particularly for shipbuilding? What makes it important that we carve out the space for it on its own? Well, I would say there are a couple of critical and arguably for that, a couple of critical reasons, and arguably for that reason, it deserves particular care and concern. So let's start the first one. The strongest part, if we're honest, of our shipbuilding landscape in the UK is naval ship and submarine build. And both have never been more crucial as we live in, at best, strained geopolitical relationships. Non-delivery is simply not an option, yet I bet today for those programs, if you ask them what their most significant threat, skills would be very near the very top. And if we look beyond our defence programs to our non-naval industry, from commercial shipbuilding to small boats, luxury yachts, ferries, these industries look at our naval programs with envy. They would love to have the visibility of demand and orders to move up from, in some cases, just surviving, to more thriving in a way that makes sense for an island nation that will always be dependent on maritime vessels for our society and economy. So it's a big task for sure. So then the next question is who owns it? So this is interesting for me because I was discussing this with my colleague from the NSO, Rue McElmoyle, and she did that clever thing of flipping the question to me. And the prompting question she asked was, well, not so much who owns it, but who governs shipbuilding? And then, actually, since I took up this chair role, every day's been a school day, but this is a particular one. She went on to educate me that in the community power debate in the US in the 1960s, they asked themselves the question, who really governs? Is it the elite? Or is it a plurality or variety of stakeholders? And then a consideration that the word govern is the root of the word government, but they are not the same thing. Not everyone who governs is part of the government, which would suggest that we all have a role in governance. And that's exactly the idea behind the National Shipbuilding Strategy. It's a partnership between government and industry, and in the case of skills, a partnership between government, industry, and educators. If governance isn't entirely the role of elected politicians and government, then there's clearly a role for industry and educators too. And that brings me to the group that brought the Shipbuilding Skills Delivery Group about. The UK Shipbuilding Skills Task Force, a group we are indebted to for their hard works, 18 months meeting once a month to tackle the big picture questions of what a route map, a plan for skills for shipbuilding should be. And that task force made recommendations to all three of those bodies, government, industry, and educators, imploring them to continue collaborating, which is why we're doing exactly what we're doing through the Shipbuilding Skills Delivery Group. We stood up as an organisation in June this year as a, by design, intentionally smaller group than the Skills Task Force, but nevertheless designed to ensure that it is representative of the wider sector, reflecting the technical breadth, the variety of scale, and the geographical spread across the UK. We aim to ensure representation through active engagement with the whole sector, taking opportunities such as this event, and thank you for listening, to do just that. As a group, we enjoy excellent industry representation for commercial, small boat, luxury, craft and naval shipbuilding, from trade unions as the voice of employees, as well as education, industry bodies and the Royal Navy. We receive willing support from our colleagues, and I'm indebted to them, from the National Shipbuilding Office, and crucially the support of the sector skills leads from each of the 4 nations of the UK. an important element of the reality of different skills landscapes for each of those nations. So what is our aim? Our aim is, in the first instance, to implement the recommendations of the Skills Task Force as set out in the report of last year. And to do that, we started out by firstly scoring the recommendations to get ourselves a vital few. We chose 4 starting priorities that we believe that we can deliver the strongest impact. Our first addresses directly that concern that I mentioned arising from falling birth rate. In a world of reducing 17-year-olds and the unfortunate loss of free movement of people, we are going to have to fight harder than ever to attract young people, not so young people, and any people. And there's a part about this which is, and I think this is broader than shipbuilding, we have to start looking at people for what their inherent capability is, not what they're doing just now, or what the results were from GCSE levels or any other qualification. That's going to be our reality. I use this phrase a lot. When it comes to skill, hunger makes good kitchen. And we'll be looking at people not for what they do just now, but what they're capable of doing. So coalescing our sector around that, and coalescing sector employees specifically to present the reality of an attractive sector rich in opportunity, is our first essential task to improve the public perception of shipbuilding as a career of choice. Our second big ask and task is very much picking up directly from the task force, who identified that there's already a range of skill supports tools across the UK and devolved nations. And here's the ask and task to those employees. Do those employers know that these tools exist? And how do we ensure that they get used for maximum positive impact? After 2 direct asks where we are asking employers to do their bit, in turn we have an ask from industry. And our third seeks support from government and educators to build a more flexible and modular learning landscape. And closely allied to that, our fourth priority, for now, because there will be more coming, is to map out the future skills foresighting, which will need that flexible approach to go at the pace that will be needed to be competitive around the globe. I've already said that the heart of this challenge is predominantly an issue in shortage of skills gained through work-based learning or apprenticeships in plain language. And here I'd share an opinion that at the core of our issue is that the UK has failed to adapt to the fact that we have become a nation of SMEs. So the multitudes of large business apprenticeship training schools that I grew up with have shrunk away, and that capacity has been nowhere near replicated in the now 99% of SMEs who make up our industry. Large employer apprentice programs are still massively important. Again, from my close doorstep, in Scotland this year, in 2024-5, our 2 naval shipyards will make up over 15% of our entire engineering apprenticeship starts. But if we're really going to move the needle, then we need to find a way to enable, to incentivize and support the long tail of SMEs to up their apprentice numbers, and doing that is going to be critical to our success. So it's another example of why I firmly believe that the work of the SSDG is so important. We have to work with industry, governments and educators to make a bigger cake to share, not just fighting over a bigger slice that means less for someone else. In essence, we're focusing on the delivery part of our name because we're not the shipbuilding skills consideration group. And when we think about the priorities for the ways we work, within that we're determined to be clear that we are a national initiative, championing the skills needs of every part of the sector, wherever in the UK that is located. We want to apply rigor to the process in planning and delivery and the allocation of resources, and to get a handle on the data that will drive good decisions in industry, in government and in education. So, what's my ask to you? What's our ask to you to help us with? Well, if you want to change something, if you want something to change, then you have to be prepared to change something. And here our big ask is not easy, as we are asking you to join forces in ways that will be more involved than what you do today, in order to use the breadth and depth to raise our collective profile. We need to ask you to engage and work in partnership with your local educators and training providers to help them to help you. And we ask you to engage with the SSDG, the Skills Delivery Group. We're here as a forum for collaboration, not to compete with or replace the good work that's been done on skills elsewhere. There will be ways in which your organisation can contribute to the SSDG's activity. Please just ask us and we will be glad to engage. And here's an easy example of how you can help. Right now, we're plotting how we're going to build a sustained and sustainable online comms campaign of good news and technical excellence that works to move the needle in the UK's public perception of shipbuilding as a brilliant career of choice. We will leverage the width we have in the group to make the biggest noise amongst ourselves. And after that, what we'd ask your help with is to click a like, add a comment, or share to your network that will help get us further up the algorithm and reach more people. It's not too much to ask for a first one, is it? I'll close by returning to the question of who governs when it comes to skills for shipbuilding. So clearly, the right answer is we all do. But it's going to take more than just a soundbite of support to make the meaningful change that we seek. I genuinely do believe, though, that the rewards will be well worth the investment. Thanks so much.